Chapter 986. Crucial point. On screen, Steamed Bun Invasion looked like he had just gone on stage. He was filled with energy as he continued to clash with Lin Yi's 10,000 swords. From time to time, he would make a weird move that would be calmly received by Lin Yi. However, that was all. The situation stayed the same as before. Lin Yi firmly grasped the pace of the match. If not, how could even the normal audience members already be certain of who the winner of this fight would be? Xiao Jia saw this scene and smiled. "He's quite tenacious," he said. "Tenacious? You're mistaken. That's not tenacity. He hasn't even started considering giving up or persevering. He's just continuing to keep his own pace. I won't deny that Lin Yi has the fight under control at the moment, but it's still too early to say who will win and who will lose." Haha, Xiao Jia laughed. He found it beneath him to argue. In his eyes, Yi Shu was just believing in his own lies. "Just look at the situation. You're saying it's still too early?" Xiao Jia's gaze turned back to the stage. Steamed Bun Invasion had once again done an incomprehensible move. When his powerful knee strike smashed towards 10,000 swords, Lin Yi had his 10,000 swords calmly stepped to the side and prepare to counter-attack. Who would have thought that Steamed Bun Invasion, who had whistled past him, would suddenly turn his head and shout at 10,000 swords. Brawler skill, Threaten. Threaten didn't deal direct damage. It was classified as a spirit attack, and it reduced the target's attack power. Spirit attacks could not be avoided. It could only be defended by the appropriate resistance skills, or lowered or cancelled by the spirit stat. Looking at it from the effects from this skill, Steamed Bun's abrupt threaten didn't make much sense. Maybe he planned on trading blows with his opponent. He had caught his opponent off guard and lowered the opponent's attack power. His powerful knee strike may have been dodged, but his target had been successfully threatened. However, because of the momentum from his powerful knee strike, he continued to fly past his opponent. 10,000 swords attack power might be reduced, but it wasn't like he was rooted or stunned. He continued to ready a counter-attack and chased after Steamed Bun Invasion with a downwind sword slash. Steamed Bun's reaction speed was fast, but this downwind sword slash had been timed perfectly and struck him. Steamed Bun Invasion was hit and slid to the side. Lin Yi's 10,000 swords immediately followed up with a triple slash, pursuing while also attacking at the same time, but who would have that thought? As soon as Steamed Bun Invasion steadied himself, he would ricochet towards 10,000 swords. Lin Yi was caught by surprise. He saw a sword light flash towards him. It was actually another downwind sword slash that had come from Steamed Bun Invasion's brawler this time. The priority on triple slash couldn't contest downwind sword slash's priority. Not only was 10,000 swords momentum halted, he had been struck stumbling. The stadium exploded into an uproar. Those who were a little slower might even be confused about Steamed Bun Invasion's class. How did he use downwind sword slash too? Those who were faster had already recognized that this was the newly added brawler skill, Tooth for Tooth. Tooth for Tooth was an active ability. When attacked, the character would still take damage, but the character would remember which skill was used. That skill would appear on the character's skill list. The number of uses and the skill effects was determined by Tooth for Tooth skill level. In addition, the amount of mana used for the skill would be double what it originally was. Clearly, Steamed Bun Invasion had activated Tooth for Tooth earlier. When he was hit by downwind sword slash, he remembered the skill and returned it back to its owner. From this point of view, another issue came up. He had used Tooth for Tooth, but he had also used Threaten beforehand, so the damage from the opponent's skill had been reduced when it struck. Thus, Steamed Bun Invasion's downwind sword slash had also been reduced. Returning the strike had been a good move, but that previous threaten still didn't make any sense. But even so, the downwind sword slash had caught Lin Yi off guard. Steamed Bun took this opportunity to strike back and begin his fierce assault. Happy's fanclub's spirit revived at once. They shouted, "Steamed Bun," loudly and cheered for him, but at Happy's player seats, Sun Jeping had his brows furrowed. He was thinking back to that previous scene. It just so happened that the screen did a replay of Steamed Bun's counterattack. After looking at it again, Sun Jeping moved closer to Yi Shu. If that threaten hadn't debuffed, then downwind sword slash would have been faster and the knockback would be stronger. It would have sent Steamed Bun Invasion flying into the air after his powerful knee strike missed. He would have been knocked back farther away, and he would have needed a quick recover. If he had used downwind sword slash like that, he might not have gotten the same results, Yi Shu said. So that guy? Don't ask me if he did it on purpose. I have no idea either, Yi Shu said. And this was why Steamed Bun's derailment playstyle was so terrifying. His completely unexpected move could be utter trash, but it could also be a brilliant turning point. When it was utter trash, you could laugh at it all you want, but when it became a turning point, it would be a deciding factor. And this deciding factor was impossible to defend against. Even someone as skilled as Sun Jeping needed to think about it after the event took place. When playing in a match, there was no time for so much thinking. How many people could instantly recognize the subtle involvement this move had? The expression on Xiao Jia's face turned ugly when he saw Steamed Bun's counterattack. However, Lin Yi was a steady player. He quickly got out of Steamed Bun's assault and once again regained control of the situation. Steamed Bun's counterattack looked like one final desperate struggle. Xiao Jia let out a sigh of relief and glanced at Happy's side with delight. He saw Yi Shu turn his head and look at him too. He immediately smiled. He really knows how to surprise people. And isn't that why he's so interesting? Yi Shu smiled. Yeah, Xiao Jia nodded his head. Suddenly, he heard a cry of surprise from the venue. Xiao Jia turned his head and saw that Lin Yi's 10,000 swords was being slapped into the ground and beaten black and blue by Steamed Bun Invasion's tyrannical chain punch. What happened? Xiao Jia was shocked. The situation had been stabilized just moments before. How did it flip all of a sudden? It just so happened that the screen showed an instant replay. Powerful knee strike. Another powerful knee strike. This time, the distance between the two sides had been very close. Lin Yi's 10,000 swords had been in the middle of a combo. He had used headwind strike, when Steamed Bun Invasion suddenly burst forth with a powerful knee strike. Blood flew out from Steamed Bun Invasion as he slammed into the headwind strike head-on. However, Steamed Bun Invasion forcefully broke through the sword prison just like that and followed up with a tyrannical chain punch. The airborne 10,000 swords crashed to the ground, following which was the current scene. Xiao Jia was astonished. For a final desperate struggle, it should be one last struggle. How could someone facing death do a final struggle again and again? If he kept on struggling, that only meant one thing. This person couldn't die. Maybe claiming victory already really had been too early? Xiao Jia thought to himself, but he refused to accept it. In terms of equipment, they were stronger. In terms of players, they were more consistent. In terms of the situation on stage, they had always been winning. Just looking at their health bars, even though Steamed Bun Invasion had done 2 desperate struggles, he hadn't pulled it that much closer. He had taken downwind sword slash full force. He had completely eaten a headwind strike too. The damage from headwind strike was quite high. In addition, Lin Yi had control of the situation for most of the battle. 10,000 swords had 50% more health than Steamed Bun Invasion. Could Steamed Bun Invasion actually make a comeback? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Xiai Jia couldn't bother with going over to Happy and letting out a smile showing his superiority. He stared closely at the screen and saw their lead, yet he couldn't help but feel nervous. Xiao Jia's nervousness was deserved. Steamed Bun started to slowly make a comeback. The steady Lin Yi was already having trouble controlling the fight. Whenever Steamed Bun went off the rails, he would always deal significant damage towards 10,000 swords. Although Lin Yi was sometimes able to strike back, it wasn't as effective as Steamed Bun's attacks. Xiao Jia became more and more uneasy. He was even somewhat angry. It looked like he wasn't happy with Lin Yi's performance. Unfortunately, his anger couldn't be transmitted into the fight. The health bars of the two characters grew closer and closer, bit by bit, all the way until both sides only had 8% health left. Happy's fan club had gone crazy. They took whatever they had that could make noise and started making as much noise as possible. Under 7 Field's lead, they cheered in unison, Steamed Bun. Steamed Bun didn't let them down. On the other hand, Lin Yi's performance was disappointing compared to the start of the fight. Jade Dynasty's fan club was cheering on their team captain, but when Steamed Bun Invasion led with 5% health compared to 10,000 swords 3% health, they had trouble bearing it. He had such a huge lead, and he actually lost it? But no matter if it was 5% health or 3% health, a single wave of attacks could end it for either sides. The match had reached this point. It just depended on who would grasp the final opportunity. The fans on both sides and the players on both sides were standing up, staring closely at the match screen. Steamed Bun Invasion. In the final moment, Steamed Bun Invasion once again made another strange, unconventional move, helping him grasp the final opportunity. 10,000 Swords only had 3% health left. He was unable to grasp the final opportunity. Steamed Bun Invasion had won the first round of the group arena. Oh 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 oh, Happy's fan club cheered. The team also clapped in celebration. Jade Dynasty's side was rather quiet. However, this was a group arena, so with the other side only having 5% health remaining, from an overall perspective, it wasn't too bad. Even so, when Jade Dynasty's team captain, Lin Yi, came down from the stage, he was met with harsh rebuke from his boss, Xiao Jia. What was that? You had such a big lead, and your opponent actually turned it around? With that type of performance, what type of example are you setting for your teammates? Sorry, Lin Yi's face carried a trace of exhaustion, but he could only quietly accept the boss's fury. Chapter 987. Whose mistake was it? What's with that guy? Chen Guo couldn't bear Xiao Jia's behavior any longer. If the match was played poorly, it was normal for post-match critique. It was just that when pointing out mistakes, it was best to console the player first and then calmly analyze why the match had gone the way it did. Everyone had their own way of communicating, but starting with criticism outright was no good. Although Lin Yi lost the match, he had lowered his opponent's health down to 5%. That was still an acceptable result. However, he originally had complete control over the fight, but in the end, his opponent stole away the win. Such a fall was the true reason why Xiao Jia wasn't happy, which was why even though the outcome wasn't too bad, Lin Yi was still extremely indignant. Chen Guo stopped watching. After all, this was the other team's matter. It wouldn't be good to butt in. After being admonished, Lin Yi quietly sat to the side. The other players came over and patted his shoulders to console him. As for Xiao Jia, after venting his anger, his mood seemed to have taken a turn for the better. He looked very satisfied with his strict way of handling the issue. He even had a smile on his face as he turned to say to Happy, "We actually lost with such a big lead. We've really made a fool of ourselves in front of God Yi. If it's just because of us making a comeback, you shouldn't blame him too much," Yi Shu replied. What do you mean? Xiao Jia said. If he had been picked to go first because you guys guessed that our first player would be Steamed Bun and specifically made preparations on dealing with him, then the person who arranged for him to go first should be the one responsible for bearing this loss, Yi Shu said. What are you saying? The expression on Xiao Jia's face changed. Yi Shu smiled. He had seen through it all. Usually, the team captain was responsible for the pick order. However, from Xiao Jia's bossy rebuke, it looked like the team owner not only guided the general direction of the team, he even interfered in the team's tactical arrangements. An amateur leading experts was always a major fear. As for Xiao Jia, he couldn't be considered a complete amateur at Glory. After all, he had been a fan of Glory for so many years. Even if he hadn't eaten pork before, he had seen pigs run. Just because he didn't have pro-level technical skill, that didn't necessarily mean he didn't have pro-level tactics and theory crafting. It was similar to how although a football coach might not be an outstanding football player, but the coach still had the qualifications to tell the team how to kick the ball. It was the same reasoning. Since he was interfering with the team's matters, when something happened to the team, he should naturally have a clear idea of knowing where the problem lay. Was it because of a bad pick order or because of the player performing poorly? Lin Yi lost the match. When he came down, he was yelled at by Xiao Jia. Chen Guo didn't like his conduct, but Yi Shu didn't even put it in his eyes. Xiao Jia couldn't distinguish between right and wrong. Yi Shu didn't know if Xiao Jia actually had the skill to control the team in such a manner, but from what he saw in the first match, if Lin Yi had been placed specifically to deal with Steamed Bun, then that had not been a wise move. Sure enough, after pointing this out, the expression on Xiao Jia's face turned even uglier. It appeared that he really had been the one to make the arrangements, so when Lin Yi had control of the fight, he had been delighted, feeling that it was because of his own genius that allowed Lin Yi to suppress his opponent, but after a comeback was made, he suddenly became furious. He thought that Lin Yi failed to seize such a good opportunity. He had placed victory right before his eyes, yet Lin Yi couldn't even grab it. In his eyes, Lin Yi was utter trash. But now, Yi Shu actually said that it was problem with the pick order? What do you mean? Xiao Jia glared at Yi Shu. He didn't even act as polite like before. Judging Lin Yi to be steamed bun's bane is a mistake, Yi Shu said. Based on what? Xiao Jia called into question. Based on the results of that round, Yi Shu smiled. What a joke, Xiao Jia sneered. What does the outcome of a single round prove? What's more, Lin Yi had complete control of the match in the beginning. If he hadn't been careless. Once is carelessness. Twice is carelessness, but being careless continuously? Have you not considered that there might be another reason for it? Yi Shu said. So you're saying that it was because of the pick order? Are you saying that he shouldn't be matched against an opponent that's too easy, so he won't easily underestimate his opponent? Xiao Jia's voice was filled with ridicule. You should think about the specifics yourself, Yi Shu smiled. He didn't give him a detailed explanation. What? You don't know, Xiao Jia sneered. Yi Shu said helplessly, don't tell me you're hoping that I'll help you analyze how to beat my team? Then how about you enlighten me after we beat your team? When the time comes, it won't affect the big picture anymore, Xiao Jia said. You guys are going to need a lot of luck then, Yi Shu said. Don't worry about it, Xiao Jia said coldly. The current him had completely torn off his initial modesty. After this loss, his pride, his arrogance, and his conceit had been entirely revealed. From this perspective, Xiao Jia wasn't a sophisticated person. His ugly side took form with just a slight pull of the trigger. On stage, the second round had already begun. A Ghostblade player from Jade Dynasty came out to battle. From a team composition perspective, Jade Dynasty had its own unique characteristics. Their team's main roster consisted of 4 swordsmen, a berserker, a blade master, a ghostblade, a spellblade, as well as a healer. This Ghostblade player was one of their main roster players. His character was called Anxious Ghost. He was a fairly standard Ghostblade player that walked the middle road, a Phantom Demon Sword Demon hybrid. Steamed Bun Invasion only had 5% of his health left. The two sides clashed. Not waiting for anything surprising to happen, Anxious Ghost made quick work of him. The previous round had been a narrow victory over Lin Yi, but Happy's fan club cheered as if Steamed Bun had done a 1v5. Nothing really happened this round and Steamed Bun was killed. Happy's fan club immediately began jeering at him without mercy, and they even took something as unrealistic as a 1v5 to jab at him. It wasn't them being mean. It was because they viewed Steamed Bun as their friend, a brother who had once played with him in-game. It was a form of teasing between bad friends. Steamed Bun shook his head as he went down from the stage. He actually seemed a bit angry at his quick loss in the second round. I only had that much health left. They didn't even give me some Steamed Buns to recover. I. Everyone on Happy's side laughed. They saw Steamed Bun sit down dejectedly. No one went over to console him though because everyone knew there was no need to. Sure enough, 5 seconds later, after hearing the fan club's teasing, Steamed Bun turned his head and started chattering away. This guy even tried to climb over the wall between the players and the crowd, but the security guards stopped him. The security guards were at a loss. They had seen fans rushing towards the player area, but they had never seen a player climb towards the fans. Was that in accordance with the rules? The security guards didn't know. They hadn't noticed in the rules whether a player was permitted to leave his seat and go to the audience. Who would think of doing such a thing? Not long after Steamed Bun went off stage, Team Happy's second player came up. It was coincidentally Team Happy's Ghostblade, Chao Yifan. Chao Yifan's Ghostblade, 1-inch Ash, was a pure Phantom Demon though, which was a lot worse at 1v1s. He only had 2 pieces of silver equipment too, while Team Jade Dynasty's Anxious Ghost was the same as their captain's 10,000 swords. Anxious Ghost had 7 pieces of silver equipment. From just their characters, 1-inch Ash was at a fairly large disadvantage. But in terms of player skill, Chao Yifan was much more consistent than Tang Ru and Steamed Bun. He had come from a champion team too, so he had solid fundamentals. Even if Team Tiny Herb never gave him a chance to play in a match, just from their practice quality, how could a team like Jade Dynasty, which had been relegated for so many years, compare to a champion team? Moreover, after receiving wholehearted guidance from a god like Yi Shu, his class change was a huge success. At this point, Chao Yifan could already clearly feel the advantages from changing classes. He was like a fish swimming in water. His intuition and awareness were like a match made in heaven with phantom demons. He had never felt such comfortableness and freedom when he had played as an assassin on Team Tiny Herb. As his skill level increased, this feeling of comfort became even stronger. Chow Yifan simply loved this class too much. His control over the class had reached a point where his character would move however he wished it to. For Chow Yifan, it greatly made up for his confidence, which he had always been lacking. He no longer doubted himself. He firmly believed that he would become an outstanding pro player. The fight began. Team J Dynasty's Anxious Ghost raised his sword and charged over. In the previous fight, he made quick work of the nearly dead Steam Bun invasion. Victory had been easy. It wasn't enough. The current him was in high spirits. His thirst for battle was also extremely fierce. He hated how he couldn't immediately start clashing with his opponent and fight a real battle. Chow Yifan did not directly rush towards Anxious Ghost and instead took a different path. He began circling around from the side. This battle would begin with an ambush from one side. It had to be said that Chow Yifan's difficult practice for half a year as an assassin had helped him grasp the techniques of an assassin. For example, a sneak attack was something that assassins needed to be proficient at. Chow Yifan wasn't great, but he had tried his best the entire time. His grasp of it might not be very high level, but it was at least very solid. He wouldn't lose it just because he had changed classes. The Phantom Demon 1-inch Ash's sneak attack route was extremely precise. He circled around diagonally. When he showed his head, he was already behind Anxious Ghost. Idiot. Behind you. Seeing this scene, Xiao Jia suddenly cursed anxiously. Chow Yifan wasn't in a hurry to attack. He hid himself behind Anxious Ghost, observing his movements. Chapter 988. Ghost Feast. Those who had been following Happy's matches all felt that this moment was very familiar. In the match against Mysterious Fantasy, Happy's Mo Fan and his deception had followed their opponent in the same patient, careful manner, waiting for the perfect chance to strike suddenly. After gaining the upper hand, he didn't linger, but quickly retreated, before repeating this process over and over until his opponent was dead. Seeing Chow Yifan's 1-inch Ash also quietly sneaking behind his opponent, everyone couldn't help but remember the match that day. Though it was a different player, they were from the same team, so they might use similar playstyles. If that were true, then that would make things very boring, no? Boos rose from the crowd. It was evident that Mo Fan's playstyle wasn't liked. If you managed to burst your opponent in a sneak attack, that would be pretty great to watch, but Mo Fan's repetitive playstyle, always doing a hasty retreat just as the match was coming to a crescendo, might have been familiar and comfortable to him, but the audience was always denied that last breath of relief because of his rhythm, and held it in uncomfortably. With this experience in their minds, and seeing Chow Yifan seemingly about to do the same thing, the crowd loudly expressed their displeasure. Amidst the boos, Xiao Jia glanced over at Happy. Now, he wasn't nervous anymore. This sort of stalling playstyle was rather annoying. However, this was a group arena and not an individual competition, so every player had the chance to fight multiple players. And this sort of stalling playstyle, while not very fun to watch, tested a player's skill and required them to expend a lot of concentration. In the group arena, players couldn't only focus on defeating their current opponent if they wanted their team to win. They also had to conserve as much energy as possible while defeating their current opponent, so as to do as much damage as possible to the next opponent. Therefore, this sort of playstyle that required a player to expend a lot of mental energy wasn't very appropriate for the group arena. As if hearing the crowd's boos, the J Dynasty player on stage suddenly went on high alert. After rushing through a good portion of the map and not seeing the opponent, you would usually realize the other planned to ambush you. This was a very common tactic, but for Happy, they needed to be more careful. This was because they had Deception's endless stalking and Windward Formation's shameless and dirty hiding and sneaking. Both were rather disgusting to deal with. But with Mysterious Fantasy testing out the waters for them, J Dynasty's players were prepared for this. Upon realizing that the opponent had such intentions, they didn't panic, instead heading resolutely towards Team Happy's spawn point. This was thanks to the experience they got from the match Happy had with Mysterious Fantasy. This was to prevent the other from finding some random place to huddle up and making them waste their energy and time for nothing. Seeing his team's player reacting so quickly and accurately, Xiao Jia nodded in satisfaction. They had done careful planning on going up against Happy, and this sort of situation was the kind they put the most thought into. The decision the Ghost Blade player had made was in accordance with Xiao Jia's thoughts, making him feel secure. Even though 1-inch Ash wasn't huddled away at the spawn point, there would be no problem, so long as they followed the current strategy. Just as Xiao Jia was thinking this, a blade flashed on the field and Qiao Yifan's 1-inch Ash attacked. Although Jade Dynasty's player had prepared to head off to the spawn point to check, that didn't mean he had let his guard down. Qiao Yifan's sneak attack wasn't very well timed and Anxious Ghost rolled, easily dodging the strike. While he got up, he sent a moonlight slash back. 1-inch Ash jumped backwards to dodge, and the flash of energy swept past the tip of his nose. Anxious Ghost followed up with a full moonlight slash. Moonlight slash and full moonlight slash were two different skills, but since the combination of the skills was cool and practical, one would follow the other more or less 80% of the time, as if they were two parts of the same skill. 1-inch Ash had dodged the moonlight slash, but was struck by this full moonlight slash. After receiving the blowback, he rolled twice before managing to quick recover and steadied himself. Seeing Anxious Ghost approaching, blade in hand, he turned and ran. Ha ha ha, seeing this, Xiao Jia immediately laughed aloud. This was exactly what failing to steal a chicken and losing a handful of rice was, in his eyes. This ambush of Happy's was too weak. Not only did he fail to gain the upper hand, but he also fell into a disadvantageous position and was now being chased by their player. Xiao Jia was inwardly delighted and involuntarily glanced over at Happy. Xiao Jia hoped that Happy's members would display a bit of anxiety on their faces. Yet when he turned to look, they were all sitting calmly as if waiting for a fish to bite, especially Yi Shu, who was even smiling. Xiao Jia wanted to say something, but seeing how no one turned to pay him any attention, he held back. On the field, Qiao Yifan's 1-inch Ash turned and darted into a small alleyway nearby. The map they were on was an ancient town. Under the fading light of the setting sun, 1-inch Ash immediately turned upon entering the alleyway. His shadow was still stretched out and left behind him. When Anxious Ghost charged over, he immediately saw this and sped up to give chase. Tisk tisk, the small details are what decides victory, Xiao Jia lamented. The current match, Happy vs Jade Dynasty, was being streamed. Currently, the different angles and shots included the streaked one. Just now, they had given a close-up of the lengthy shadow stretched out behind 1-inch Ash and the commentator was analyzing the mistake made by Qiao Yifan. You should have your back to the setting sun, not your face, the commentator expressed. Yet he saw 1-inch Ash stop, huddling behind a wall and setting down a sword boundary to increase his strength and intelligence, preparing his ambush. I believe that Jade Dynasty's player couldn't possibly not be ready for this, the commentator said with confidence. Using the corner to make a sneak attack was a commonly employed tactic, so how could a pro player not be prepared for such a happening? As expected, Jade Dynasty's Anxious Ghost didn't walk along the wall when he came in pursuit, but used an extra 2 steps to send himself into a rather large pathing curve. This way, he could gain some distance and guard against an ambush. What pro player wouldn't know to do this? Even so, 1-inch Ash's Ta Chi still swung up, a moonlight slash was sent at Anxious Ghost, character and sword flying at him. Tisk tisk, this ambush, the commentator was about to comment on this ambush and Qiao Yifan's attack from before and how childish they were, but Anxious Ghost seemed to have become dumbstruck, lifting the Ta Chi in hand, but not seeming to know what he was doing. 1-inch Ash's moonlight slash struck its target. After moonlight slash was a full moonlight slash, the same combo, expect that Qiao Yifan followed the knockback effect with a ghost slash. Anxious Ghost's momentum in the air immediately increased, like a cannonball, flying head first into the mud. The Jade Dynasty player quick recovered, making Anxious Ghost's original head into the ground into a diving forward roll. As he rolled, he turned. A flash of energy from his sword darted out from beneath his arm, sending out a sword draw as he got up. Yet, the sword struck air since 1-inch Ash hadn't even approached him. Over there, the edge of the blade was unsheathed and the power of phantom ghosts flowed out and under. 2 consecutive boundaries were cast. The commentator was really busy now. Not only did he have to analyze the situation at hand, he was inwardly wondering how Anxious Ghost had been successfully sneak attacked by 1-inch Ash just now. It shouldn't have been such a simple ambush, even he could dodge it if he were up there, no? However, the two sides were locked in intense battle now, so there was no time to replay the previous scene. The commentator could only pay attention to the current happenings. Yet as he stared at the match and continued to speak and speak, he spoke until he was struck dumb by his own words. Happy's 1-inch Ash has lain his fourth ghost boundary, turning this small area into a ghost boundary encyclopedia. Jade Dynasty's anxious ghost doesn't seem to be able to do much. High walls surround his left, right, and back. The only escape route is blocked by 1-inch Ash. Take a look, everyone, 1-inch Ash hasn't thrown all his ghost boundaries in a pile together. There are layers to this arrangement. This way, if Anxious Ghost tries to charge out, he'll be stopped by one of the layers of ghost boundaries, making it hard to get a good rhythm down and making things easier for 1-inch Ash. Sword draw. Oh, Anxious Ghost still maintains a very good reaction speed, he dodged it. Huh? What's he trying to do? Anxious Ghost keeps moving forward, but that's a wall over there. Oh, he bumped into the wall. Oh, it's the Seed of Darkness, or the Dark Boundary, as it's more commonly known. Sorry, there's too many interwoven ghost boundaries that even I didn't notice it. When did 1-inch Ash lay it down? Anyways, Anxious Ghost stepped into the dark boundary, and he couldn't see under its blinding effects, so he ended up walking into a wall. This seems rather ugly. Dark boundaries effects have worn off, Anxious Ghost turns. Wow, he's frozen now, an ice boundary. 1-inch Ash has the absolute advantage here. To be honest, I want to just announce his victory now, but the happenings from before taught me a lesson, so let's finish watching the match first. The commentator continued to analyze the situation and even made a joke about himself. Last match, the commentator hadn't been able to help announcing Lin Yi would win, but ended up getting his face slapped. So, in this match, he didn't dare jump to any conclusions though Chow Yifan had the absolute advantage. Anxious Ghost has been trapped there by 1-inch Ash, unable to escape. Happy's player has used the terrain to its fullest, perfectly utilizing the advantages of a Ghost Blade. Okay, now the scene we're giving everyone is 1-inch Ash's skill situation. We have the production director to thank for capturing this scene. Look, everyone, all of 1-inch Ash's boundaries are currently in use. All of the ghost boundaries in his skill build are currently on cooldown. Seeing the rotation of these cooldowns, doesn't everyone think this is a beautiful rhythm? I feel like if there was some music to go with it, it would be even better. Oh, 1-inch Ash has quickened his pace, sending out all his ghost boundaries. Now, there are a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, everyone, I can't seem to make it out clearly either, but with 1-inch Ash sending out all these boundaries, does he want Ghost Feast? Amazing, 1-inch Ash has activated Ghost Feast, making all the ghost boundaries erupt, immediately taking the rest of Anxious Ghost's health with them. 1-inch Ash won! What a beautiful victory! The commentator yelled, forgetting his composure. Chapter 989. The cautious Chow Yifan. Amidst the silence, someone from the crowd started clapping, which quickly spread until applause erupted around the entire stadium. Happy didn't have that many fans. There were even quite a few people who didn't like them. However, even people who had well-defined likes and dislikes appreciated brilliant performances. Everyone had seen Chow Yifan's prowess in this fight on the Jumbotron in front of them. Such a convincing performance truly deserved such wild applause. They now had a completely different view of that rash and initial sneak attack. It was without question to lure the opponent into his trap. Its purpose was to draw Anxious Ghost into the necessary position. Friends, I don't think you guys have forgotten about the sneak attack from the corner. Let's take a look at it again. When the commentator reviewed the match, he impatiently had the stream cut to that moment. The clip had already been prepared. However, the fight never stopped, continuing all the way until Anxious Ghost was killed. As a result, there had been no time to show the replay. It could finally be played now. Everyone watched the scene again from Anxious Ghost's perspective. When Anxious Ghost chased after 1-inch Ash to this little alleyway, 1-inch Ash had already disappeared. However, at the corner of the street, a shadow extended on the ground. Anxious Ghost noticed it and immediately ran towards it. Before he reached the corner, he moved in an arc, putting distance between the two before rushing forward to attack 1-inch Ash, who had been lying in wait. The twilight from the setting sun shone down, making things seem real, yet unreal at the same time. From Anxious Ghost's point of view, only 1-inch ash could be seen. The swordlight had been completely hidden by the setting sun. Anxious Ghost wasn't able to see the attack coming. Then, he was thrown into a corner until his defeat. So it was like that. The commentator gasped in admiration. Happy's player cleverly positioned himself so that the sunlight directly shone on him and covered his attack. Everyone paid attention. 1-inch ash jumped when he let loose a moonlight slash. This jump put this swordlight in a position where the sunlight would also conceal it. Everything had been planned accordingly. Happy had a clear strategy going into this battle. I'm sure everyone knows that even though the maps used in these matches are temporary, once the league started, all of the maps were available for download and use. The maps used in every match are announced beforehand so that the teams can prepare ahead of time. From the looks of it, Happy has put a lot of work in this area. What about Jade Dynasty? The player was also a Ghostblade. Even though he's a hybrid Phantom Sword Demon, he could have taken advantage of the map too, yet he didn't notice this point. That victory was beautiful. Let's all remember this player's name. Chow Yifan. He truly should come out and accept our applause. Unfortunately, this is a group arena. He still needs to continue playing, but worry not. There's still a long road ahead of him. I believe that this player certainly has a bright future ahead of him. Speaking of which, Chow Yifan was originally from Team Tiny Herb. For some reason, he never appeared on stage with them and left after being there for a season. Seeing Chow Yifan's performance today, I wonder if Team Tiny Herb is going to regret their decision. Amid the commentators' praise and the crowd's applause, Team J Dynasty's defeated player came down from the stage. The praise and applause was for Chow Yifan. For him, it only made it that much harder to bear. He walked very slowly as if he didn't want to go back to the player bench. Their boss, Xiao Jia, was sitting down with a dark face. Seeing his player coming down slowly, he snorted coldly and ignored him. He called over Team J Dynasty's third player. Be more mindful. The opponent has a strong grasp of the maps. Be careful and don't make the same mistakes. And, Xiao Jia instructed impatiently. I understand. The third player was Zheng Shengqiao, a berserker. His character severed yearning. After being given sincere advice from Xiao Jia, he headed towards the stage. The third round began. The current situation was very unfavorable towards Jade Dynasty. 1-inch ash had consumed lots of mana, but he had only lost 20% of his health in the previous round. Happy had nearly a one-person lead over Jade Dynasty. Even with a disadvantage, Xiao Jia sat upright. He didn't smile as he turned his head over and talked to Yi Shu. The match began. Due to Chow Yifan's outstanding performance in the previous round, the commentator couldn't help but reveal a bit of bias towards him. At the start, he talked about what Chow Yifan might do since he wasn't at full health and he didn't have much mana left. After his concern for Chow Yifan, he introduced Jade Dynasty's player, Zheng Shengqiao. It was somewhat awkward for berserkers to play in group arenas because of their signature skill Blood Awakening, creating the unique health trading playstyle. Because of how trading health changed the pace of the match, it made things too difficult for berserkers. In a 1v1, they could easily make this decision, but in a group arena, if they traded away their health cleanly, how were they going to take down more than one opponent? Although berserkers became stronger the lower their health, they weren't so strong that they could just instantly kill an opponent. Directly trade away 90% of their health at the start? That wasn't how trading worked. When they traded their health, they would lower their opponent's health to around the same range. If a berserker's health was low, but the opponent's health was high, don't think that was the berserker trading away his health. 99% of the time it was just the berserker getting destroyed. Their class's feature made it challenging for them to participate in the group arena, especially when the opposing side held the lead. Xiao Jia sincerely instructed his team's berserker, but his expression was still grave and stern. He clearly knew what a predicament they were in. They knew. Chow Yifan knew even better. It could be seen that from his previous performance, Chow Yifan had made ample preparations beforehand. He had taken it very seriously and played very carefully. He had even taken note of the sunlight at the corner of the street and utilized it to his advantage. How could he not have been prepared for his current situation? Zheng Shengchao didn't hurry and search for 1-inch ash. Qiao Yifan also didn't go on the defensive to protect his lead. The two cautiously and patiently looked for opportunities. Xiao Jia couldn't help but feel somewhat fretful upon seeing this scene. He had figured that the other side would be more proactive and bold because of his lead. Certain decisions that might not be considered under normal circumstances might be made as a result. After all, he had a health lead as a backup. Thus, he had instructed Zheng Shengchao to take advantage of the other side's mentality. But from the looks of it, the other side didn't have that sort of mentality. Xiao Jia couldn't help but feel doubtful. In the previous round, Qiao Yifan had taken the initiative and lured his opponent into a trap, but in this round, he had actually become more careful. Let alone boldly attempting it when there was a 30% chance, the current Qiao Yifan turned a blind eye to even a 50-60% chance. He was looking for an even more certain opportunity. Xiao Jia's prediction was completely wrong. He couldn't help but feel unhappy. On stage, Zheng Shengchao had long since noticed this point. After some more careful probing, he decided to abandon Xiao Jia's advice. The other side wasn't falling for it. Unable to bait the opponent, Zheng Shengchao could only search for an opportunity to forcefully break through to the opponent, but Qiao Yifan refused to face him directly. Qiao Yifan weaved in and out of the alleys as if it was his own home. Zheng Shengchao was puzzled. It was a new map for both sides. How come the other side was so familiar with it? How could he know this map like back of his hand? Zheng Shengchao, who had been chasing him the entire time, was starting to become impatient. Every time he reached a corner, he lifted his head to see where the sun was. He had to think about whether that place might have traps set, a dead end, or if it could be completely sealed off by ghost boundaries. Because of all the thinking he needed to do, he often lost his target, making him feel even more annoyed. Are you planning on running around until you recover all of your mana? Zheng Shengchao couldn't bear it anymore and spoke to the other side through the all chat. Glory characters had basic health and mana recovery, but it was very slow in real combat. If not, wouldn't the matches go on forever? Zheng Shengchao knew the other side didn't have that goal in mind. These words were purely to provoke him. At Happy's benches, Yi Shu actually went over to ask Chen Guo, did Yifan bring recovery equipment into the game? Do you think everyone thinks like you do? Chen Guo felt hopeless. Yi Shu had done this before, but it had actually been a very bold move. Bringing 2 sets of equipment increased the character's weight significantly. Fighting would feel different. It was hard to say if bringing an extra set of equipment was actually helpful or harmful, so the switching equipment playstyle only lasted a short while before becoming non-existent. It was considered okay to bring 1 or 2 extra pieces of equipment, but the end result of carrying 2 full sets of equipment might just be dragging the character to their own death. Even Yi Shu only dared to do so against Team Everlasting. If he had to compete against similar level experts, he would need to carefully ponder over it. I feel like with Yifan's skill level, bringing an extras set is still quite reasonable. Wei Chen gave an enthusiastic thumbs up. His words meant that Qiao Yifan had the ability to toy around with Jade Dynasty's player. Do you really think Yifan's as shameless and unscrupulous as you guys? Chen Guo was about to go crazy. I think it's just because Yifan's rather cautious, Yi Shu said. Yeah, he's probably overestimating these Jade Dynasty players, Wei Chen said. We also figured that Jade Dynasty was hiding their strength, Yi Shu said. Yes, that's right. If it wasn't for that, he would definitely have brought another set of equipment, Wei Chen said. Yeah, he definitely would have, Yi Shu nodded his head. Get out of here. You two, F***ck off, Chen Guo yelled. Chapter 990. Remaining Mana. Yi Shu and the others were all joking around off stage, while Qiao Yifan, on stage, was completely unaffected by his opponent's taunting. Jade Dynasty's Zheng Shengchao had no idea as to where 1-inch Ash was or where he was heading, but the audience could clearly see how 1-inch Ash was darting in and out of the alleyways with familiarity. This sort of playstyle was usually very unpopular, but because of Qiao Yifan's brilliant performance last match, the audience's tolerance for Qiao Yifan's playstyle had obviously become very high. Even the commentator was praising Qiao Yifan's patience, saying that it was rare that someone kept such a cool head when they were in the lead by a full player in the group arena. Okay, Qiao Yifan's 1-inch Ash has once again managed to sneak behind Severed Yearning once again. Will he manage to grasp an opportunity this time? The commentator kept his eyes on the match. He's approached, but this position doesn't seem very appropriate for a Ghostblade's ambush. Let's see what Chow Yifan will do. Oh, he's laid down a ghost boundary. It's a flame boundary. Seems like Chow Yifan also knows that this environment isn't too great for ghost boundaries, so he's aiming to deal damage. J Dynasty's player noticed, turned around, collapsing mountain. He has a very fast reaction speed. It looks like Zheng Shengqiao was waiting for 1-inch Ash to strike. Chow Yifan has backed away. Seems like he felt that this opportunity wasn't a very good one. However, it's obvious that Zheng Shengqiao isn't willing to let Chow Yifan go so easily this time, and he's pursuing. Exchanges like this have happened several times already, and Chow Yifan has continuously managed to slip away, utilizing his familiarity with the map. However, this time, it seems like Zheng Shengqiao has gained a better understanding of the map during the match. He refuses to be shaken off. Huh? This place, the commentator made a questioning sound before he started to become excited. The broadcast very cooperatively flashed to the area the commentator had noticed. The audience looked over, and immediately understood the commentator's excitement. This area had a very similar terrain to where Chow Yifan killed his last opponent. A brilliant performance was about to follow. The audience perked up, and some even began applauding. As for Team Happy's supporters, they had already begun to cheer and yell with excitement. J Dynasty's members were extremely anxious at this moment. It didn't feel good to be spectating this at all. They could only watch as their teammate fell into the opponent's trap, but were helpless to do anything about it. Half of J Dynasty's players had even stood up, but their boss, Xiao Jia, was still sitting, unmoving, though his own anxiety was evident. His gaze even revealed a hint of rage, clearly unhappy at how his players were continuously falling for their opponent's tricks. Under the eyes of the people, Zheng Chaosheng didn't fail their expectations. His severed yearning took that final step. A ghost boundary practically matched the timing for this step, coming down on severed yearning's head. Chow Yifan had perfectly timed the skill, beginning to cast it beforehand, and just finishing the cast with this step. Zheng Shengqiao was shocked, but didn't panic. He wanted nothing more than for Chow Yifan to stop and face him head-on. With a colliding stab, severed yearning charged at 1-inch Ash. 1-inch Ash whirled around in a dodge, bounding to switch of positions with severed yearning. After the colliding stab, severed yearning spun around and Zheng Shengqiao only noticed the terrain of his environment then. His heart missed a beat, feeling dread rising. However, he was already trapped in a ghost boundary, and 1-inch Ash swung the Tai Chi in his hand. Ghost boundaries came down one after another. The audience yelled and cheered, abandoning all pretense, while J Dynasty's players all felt like crying. Zheng Shengqiao struggled, wanting to break out of the encirclement of ghost boundaries, yet was met with failure after failure. Compared to the Ghostblade of last round, Berserkers were a lot better at breaking through, but didn't have nearly as high of a resistance to the effects of ghost boundaries. Falling into a CC chain like this was much more troublesome for Zheng Shengqiao than for the last match's Ghostblade player. Severed Yearning's life dropped constantly, the audience applauded thunderously, J Dynasty's players sat silently, and boss Xiao Jia's expression made him look like he was ready to eat someone. Chow Yifan has done it yet again, an amazing performance. However, this sort of playstyle consumes a lot of mana, so it seems that this time he won't be able to wipe out his opponent. That's perfectly fine though, being able to expend all your mana in the group arena means you've truly done everything you can. Chow Yifan has reached this limit wonderfully. If Happy wins the group arena, then Chow Yifan would have made the greatest contribution. The commentator kept praising Chow Yifan's performance, noticing, at the same time, that 1-inch Ash's mana might not be enough and therefore wouldn't be able to keep up this playstyle of layering ghost boundaries in excess. Ah, so close. A split second after the commentator finished analyzing the situation, he gave a cry from a sudden change on the field. Meanwhile, the audience suddenly gave a loud collective sigh at the same time. Severed Yearning almost charged out of 1-inch Ash's encirclement. Though J Dynasty's player fell into a trap, it seems like he hasn't given up yet, seeking opportunities whenever he can. The commentator, having almost focused completely on 1-inch Ash, finally decided to spare a few thoughts for Zheng Shengqiao. Chow Yifan's controls seems to be too spread out this time. Seeing the two's exchange on the field, the commentator suddenly came up with this comment. Compared to the complete control of the match, Zheng Shengqiao's Severed Yearning could still find some opportunity to try and break away from the control. Though he hadn't succeeded, he wasn't losing as badly as 1-inch-ash's previous opponent. I feel like Chow Yifan might be thinking too much. Seems like he's controlling his rhythm on purpose to not completely deplete his mana so quickly. However, this leaves room for his opponent to struggle. Actually, in a situation where he has such an advantage, why doesn't Chow Yifan just use up the rest of his mana to maximize his damage? I doubt anyone would be disappointed in him if he eventually lost the match, the commentator said with some confusion and disappointment. Just as his words fell, the two on the field began their first ever head-on exchange. Zheng Shengqiao might not have been able to break through, but was able to deal a lot of damage to 1-inch-ash. Chow Yifan won't be wiped out before even depleting his mana, right? That would be such a shame. Chow Yifan, he demands too much of himself. Seeing how Zheng Shengqiao gained the upper hand in this exchange, the commentator began to worry. Again, it seems like Zheng Shengqiao is very confident in himself. Dark boundary. This dark boundary was very timely, otherwise he might really be able to hold on against this barrage. I hope Chow Yifan can take advantage of this opportunity and regain control over the situation. Yet Chow Yifan didn't accomplish what the commentator was hoping for, continuing to stubbornly keep his slow rhythm and not depleting his mana to set ghost boundaries like in the previous match. If it's just like this, I feel like there would be no need for this trap. I think Zheng Shengqiao would be more than willing to just fight Chow Yifan head-on, right? The more he spoke, the more the commentator felt disappointed in Chow Yifan's actions this round. Zheng Shengqiao is getting more and more confident as he fights, his status is at its peak. Slowly, the commentator's attention began to shift to Jade Dynasty's player. Blood Sword, Destruction / Brilliant. Soul-devouring Crimson Grip, missed, what a shame. If that grab hit, it would have changed the situation completely. Zheng Shengqiao's Severed Yearning might not have broken through, but he has gained the upper hand now, unleashing his own barrage of attacks. Chow Yifan is struggling to endure. Under a situation where he originally held the upper hand, Chow Yifan didn't utilize his ghost boundaries to their fullest, so 1-inch-ash lost a lot of health as well, with only 10% remaining. Now, what he is about to face is an even fiercer offense from his opponent because Blood Awakening has now been activated. Wait, it's been activated. The commentator suddenly realized something was wrong upon coming to this. He was dumbstruck for a long while, and it wasn't until the two on the field engaged with one another that he noticed the health of each character falling and suddenly realized, Severed Yearning's Blood Awakening had already been activated because his health had already fallen by more than 50%, and this all happened without any fanfare. All he had noticed was Chow Yifan's hardship in taking these attacks, but he hadn't noticed how Chow Yifan's 1-inch-ash had been quietly chipping away at his opponent's health all of this time. That's right. This wave of damage wasn't nearly as elegant and consistent as the last match. However, if he was as liberal with his mana and consumed it like he did in the last match, how much damage would he be able to do with the little mana he had left? Yet now, using the head-on exchanges, 1-inch-ash might have lost a lot of health, but he had also drained Severed Yearning's health by quite a bit. But how much mana had 1-inch-ash used during this fight? 10%. He had only used 10% of his mana to take over 50% of his opponent's health. This was a shocking result, and 1-inch-ash had taken a lot of damage to achieve it. Though he still had almost 20% of his mana left now, he only had 10% of his health. He might have been able to save some mana, but did he have enough health to use it? Just as these doubts arose in the commentator, he suddenly understood. It's coming. Thus, all the people watching the broadcast heard the commentator abruptly say these words. What was coming? Just as the audience was lost in their confusion, 1-inch-ash suddenly sped up the pace. Ghost boundaries flashed continuously all over the field. This extravagant scene had 1-inch-ash's mana plummeting, yet at the same time it quickly depleted Severed Yearning's health as well. It's enough. Chow Yifan's remaining mana is enough to wipe out Severed Yearning. Severed Yearning is a berserker, so he doesn't have the same resistance to ghost boundaries that the Ghost Blade from last match had, so ghost boundaries deal significantly more damage to him. Chow Yifan's remaining mana will be enough to take him out. The commentator quickly shared his findings then, but he had forgotten that the previous analysis was all in his head. Suddenly announcing this made the audience extremely confused. However, the current situation on the field became the best annotation for the commentator's words. One Injash completely took back control as he sped up without warning. Severed Yearning, who had seemingly taken control of the field for a while, was immediately drowned in ghost boundaries. He couldn't orientate himself or find a way out. His health depleted rapidly. His blood may have awakened, but there was no place to utilize it. He was securely locked in One Injash's ghost boundaries. Finally, One Injash's mana was no more, and with the last powerful skill that consumed it, Severed Yearning's life was gone, too. Chao Yifan had successfully taken out his second opponent,